Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
We are diving into a story that sits, it's exactly at the nexus of ancient myth, cutting-edge Cold War intelligence,
Yeah,
and the radical birth of modern science fiction.
right.
This is not just a story about aliens. It feels more like a detailed, almost terrifying blueprint for creating a synthetic god right here on Earth.
That's a powerful way to frame it, and I think it's the right one. Our mission today is a forensic analysis of the Council of Nine, or sometimes just the Nine.
Yeah, nine. Right.
And we have a pretty substantial stack of sources here. They trace this whole narrative from its earliest, often overlooked claim channeled revelations in the early 1950s,
Right.
all the way through to its bizarre and undeniable influence on global pop culture and even corporate boardroom strategy. It's wild.
It's the central tension, I think. That's the reason this story demands a deep dive. It's this absolute dichotomy at its core.
Explain that.
Well, on one hand, you have the claim of this profound, non-corporeal cosmic governance structure. A group of high-vibration beings who are essentially the ancient Egyptian Enid, but reborn as space administrators.
A galactic bureaucracy.
Exactly. And then sitting right next to that is the dark hypothesis, the idea that the whole thing was the sophisticated, long-term Cold War psychological operation, a carefully engineered PsyOp.
And this narrative could only have emerged in one specific chaotic historical window, right? The early 1950s.
Talk about that.
Well, you have this rigid post-war materialism, but it was starting to fracture under the weight of this new existential anxiety. People were terrified of the atomic age.
Of course, the bomb is hanging over everyone's head.
Absolutely. But at the same time, people were also starting to experiment with the nascent psychedelic counterculture. And critically, governments, particularly the U.S. intelligence community, were obsessed, absolutely obsessed with finding methods to control the human mind.
We're talking about the era of projects like Bluebird, Artichoke.
And of course, the big one, MK Ultra, the infamous decade-spanning program.
And the Nine Just. It bridges this gap perfectly. It offers the theology that rivals ancient Gnosticism in its complexity. It answers these huge questions about human origins and destiny.
But it reframes everything.
Yeah.
Figures like Adam, the Egyptian creator god, are suddenly not abstract deities, but interstellar bureaucrats.
It's the ultimate convergence of the scientific and the divine, in a way.
So we face the critical question that has to frame our entire conversation today.
What is it?
Is the Council of Nine a genuine, unsolicited revelation from what the sources call the zone of cold, a non-physical dimension? Or is it, as multiple researchers argue, the ultimate theater of the mind, a synthetic cult manufactured in the laboratories of the Cold War?
And maybe more importantly, why do we still feel its effects, decades later?
That's the challenge.
So that's what we're going to do. We're going to trace the entire narrative, follow all the breadcrumbs, and we have to start with the man at the dead center of the storm, the architect, the gatekeeper, and potentially primary handler, Dr. Andrija Puharic.
You have to start with him.
We need to analyze his extensive background and his deep, documented connections to the military-industrial complex that make this entire saga so intrinsically suspect from the very beginning.
If the Council of Nine is the message, then Dr. Andrija Puharic, and his original name was Henry Carroll Puharic, was without question the medium, the architect, and, potentially the handler.
You can't separate the nine from Puharic. They're one and the same story.
Exactly. His biography is less a life story and more a roadmap of contradiction. He was a brilliant medical inventor, a parapsychologist, and his professional interests constantly span this line between respectable academic brilliance and the highly secretive, often deeply sinister world of covert operations.
And he wasn't some fringe spiritual enthusiast, not at first. He was a serious, disciplined intellect. He graduated from Northwestern University Medical School in 1947.
Which is a huge achievement. Not a lightweight.
Not at all. But even during his medical training, his interests weren't focused purely on physical, observable medicine. They were deeply rooted in extrasensory perception, ESP.
The mechanics of the mind.
The mechanics of controlling and influencing the human mind. He was exploring exactly what the military needed to weaponize.
And that intense interest, it rapidly led him to create a formalized institutional structure to house this research. In 1948, Puharic established the Round Table Foundation in Glen Cove, Maine.
So publicly, what was this place?
Publicly, it was presented as this high-minded nonprofit organization dedicated solely to serious parapsychological research. The goal was to be a gathering place for scientists, mystics, seekers, all hoping to understand consciousness beyond the physical brain.
But the covert reality of the Foundation, I mean, it immediately shows the intelligence overlap, doesn't it?
Immediately. It wasn't just a spiritual retreat. It was a strategically placed hub for the influential and the wealthy.
We're talking about securing funding from some very socially prominent figures,
Yeah.
members of the Forbes and DuPont families.
The kind of people who provide necessary capital and, just as importantly, cover. And it also attracted these influential occult figures of the day, like the medium Alice Bailey.
Whose work on the hierarchy of masters and cosmic governance structures, it greatly informed and influenced Puharich's developing worldview.
And here is the absolutely crucial overlap. This is what links Puharich directly to the dark heart of Cold War research.
Go on.
His early work at the Foundation investigating telepathy, clairvoyance, and crucially the psychological effects of psychoactive drugs overlaps significantly with the tactical objectives of the CIA's rapidly expanding mind control programs.
Specifically Project Penguin and MKUltra.
Exactly. And to confirm his position, Puharich wasn't just a civilian researcher during this exact period. He was serving as a captain in the Army Medical Corps at Edgewood Arsenal, Maryland.
And that detail cannot be overstated. Edgewood Arsenal is not some gentle research center.
No, it's the U.S. military's primary facility for chemical warfare research.
This is precisely where they were testing high-impact, weaponizable psychochemicals like LSD and nerve agents. And they were often conducting these tests on unwitting human subjects.
So the man who would shortly claim to channel cosmic beings and save humanity was deeply embedded in the very institution designing chemical tools for total mind manipulation and control.
It's the perfect cover story for a handler. It's almost too perfect.
And this specific intelligence-heavy background is the necessary context for the genesis of the Nine narrative itself, which happened on New Year's Eve, 1952.
Right. Puharich had invited this Hindu scholar and mystic from India, Dr. D.G. Vinod, to the Roundtable Foundation to conduct parapsychological experiments.
And at precisely 9:00 p.m., Vinod entered a state of deep, deep trance.
His voice changed completely.
Completely. And he delivered the initial, somewhat abstract declaration. calling. We are 9 principles and forces, personalities, if you will, working in complete mutual implication. The nature of our work is to accentuate certain directions as will fulfill the destiny of creation.
It's important to note how abstract that is, right?
Yeah.
This initial contact isn't the science fiction spectacle we know now.
Not at all. It was highly metaphysical, philosophical, very much aligned with existing theosophy and Eastern mysticism.
And the entities just identify themselves as the 9, claiming to exist outside the physical universe as pure energy, a field of force.
Right. And Puharich, the scientist, the medical doctor, was reportedly skeptical at first.
Which you would expect.
Of course. But what supposedly convinced him was this piece of truly bizarre synchronicity involving his colleague, a Dr. Laughhead.
Okay, the carbon paper story.
The carbon paper story. Laughhead was present at the session and later sent Puharich a transcript of a separate similar session. Laughhead claimed the carbon paper he used to type this letter, which should have been completely worn out and useless.
Like faint gray smudges.
Exactly. But he claimed it allegedly rejuvenated itself mid-typing to produce a crisp, black, perfectly legible copy of a message.
And that message?
That message exactly mirrored Vinod's earlier channeled statement. We are 9 principles and forces. The nature of our work is to accentuate certain directions as will fulfill the destiny of creation.
So for Puharich, a man trained in the scientific method, this mysterious alchemical manifestation, this seemingly impossible rejuvenation of the carbon paper, that was his proof.
That was his proof positive of an external, intelligent, non-terrestrial force capable of manipulating reality at a physical level.
Right.
It was his anchor for the whole belief system.
But then comes a hard stop. Shortly after these initial revelatory sessions in 1953, Puharich was abruptly recalled to active duty by the U.S. Army.
Which effectively shut down the Roundtable Foundation's pioneering work with Vinod and the initial channeling efforts.
And skeptics point to this as the first major concrete piece of evidence supporting the whole PsyOp hypothesis.
Absolutely. This recall to active military duty, it smells less like bureaucracy and more like control.
It functions as a standard mechanism for the intelligence community, right?
Totally. They could debrief Puharich, classify the initial findings, which included successful experiments in forced telepathy and contact, and bring the emergent 9 narrative under tight intelligence control.
Removing it from the public sphere for a necessary period of, refinement, technological build-out?
Precisely. The early spiritual findings were now military property.
So Puharich gets pulled back in, And for nearly 2 decades, the Nine go silent publicly. But those quiet years weren't spent relaxing. They were spent building the specific technical infrastructure needed to make the next phase truly convincing.
That abrupt closure leads us right into the interregnum, the years between 1953 and 1970. The Nine narrative was dormant, but Puharich himself was intensely active.
Right. He was developing the specific technological tools and pursuing research that, in retrospect, looked like they were purpose-built to service and facilitate the later, much more elaborate extraterrestrial narrative.
Exactly. His research in the mid-1950s focused heavily on ethnomycology, the study of mushrooms in human culture.
Which resulted in his 1959 book, The Sacred Mushroom, Key to the Door of Eternity.
And ostensibly, the book was serious academic research. He was arguing that the Amanita muscaria mushroom was a powerful tool used by ancient shamans to separate human consciousness from the physical body to facilitate contact with other realities.
Okay, in a purely academic setting, that's fascinating research into religion and psychotropics.
Of course.
But when you overlay Puharich's Edgewood history,
It aligns perfectly with the CIA's MK-Ultra subproject 58.
which was the high-stakes, frantic search for chemical agents that could function as truth serums or agents of psychological disinhibition.
Puharich was exploring exactly the kind of compounds the intelligence agencies were hunting for to break down mental defenses and create suggestibility.
It creates a very troubling picture, doesn't it? A man with unique access to the world of classified psychological weaponry is simultaneously exploring ancient keys to altering consciousness.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because the most chilling and central development during this quiet period was Puharich's technical invention,
The patent.
the patent. He developed and patented a specialized hearing device, a radio receiver designed to be small enough to be either implanted in a tooth or cleverly hidden within a hearing aid or ear canal.
And the critical function of this device wasn't about normal hearing, was it?
Not at all. The key function of this patented device was that it didn't use the eardrum. It transmitted audio signals directly through the bone and tissue using bone conduction.
So the user could hear specific transmissions that were utterly inaudible to anyone else around them.
You got it. This technology, which he called a method and apparatus for improving hearing, is the absolute smoking gun in the PsyOp hypothesis. It is the cornerstone of the Stargate conspiracy theory.
Think about the implications. Puharich, a man with deep intelligence connections, expertise in chemical mind-altering substances, and a history of military service at Edgewood, now possesses the verified technology to beam voices directly into a subject's head.
And the psychological effect of bone conduction technology is profound. When sound is transmitted via bone, it bypasses the outer ear. The brain processes the sound as if it is originating internally.
So it sounds like your own thoughts,
Or-
or a voice from inside your head.
It completely dissolves the line between external transmission and internal belief.
So if Puharich controlled the console, broadcasting these transmissions, then all subsequent telepathic or channeled communications from entities like the Nine, they lose their supernatural veneer entirely.
The voice of God, or the voice of a cosmic being, is no longer a spiritual revelation. It is a meticulously controlled, technologically induced auditory hallucination.
A very specific, controllable type of technology that only the recipient can hear, which perfectly explains the intimacy and the isolation of the subsequent channeling experiences.
This completely reframes the entire credibility of the messages received by every subsequent medium. Puharich didn't need metaphysical principles to convince his subjects anymore.
He had the technical infrastructure to manufacture the experience of contact.
And that sets the stage for the dramatic shift that comes next. Puharich now needs a human conduit, a performer, perhaps, who is susceptible to this technological induction.
Or at least one that can be thoroughly convinced they were receiving transmissions from 53,000 light years away.
And that conduit, starting around 1970, was the famous psychic and stage magician Uri Geller.
And with Geller, the narrative of the Nine shifted dramatically and immediately, from those abstract philosophical principles into full-blown interstellar diplomacy and technological science fiction.
Puharich traveled to Israel, met Geller, who was then primarily known as a stage magician performing spoon-bending and basic telepathy acts in nightclubs, and was immediately and utterly entranced. He quickly declared Geller the most potent psychic he had ever encountered.
Puharich then brings Geller to the U.S. and, critically, subjects him to these intensive sessions, including hypnosis.
And under Puharich's guiding hand, Geller's personal narrative quickly evolved. He stopped being a simple psychic performer and started positioning himself as an ambassador of interstellar diplomacy.
So he's not just bending spoons anymore.
Not at all. Geller wasn't channeling abstract philosophical principles. He began channeling a specific, highly clinical, technological entity, a mechanical, computerized voice that called itself Spectra.
Spectra.
Spectra claimed to be a massive supercomputer operating from a spacecraft located an immense distance away, 53,000 light-years, and that the supercomputer reported directly to the Council of Nine.
The narrative had gone full cosmic bureaucracy. They've got org charts now.
I really do. And the entities, through Spectra, they significantly upped the manipulation stakes. They claimed they had actually programmed Geller from a young age specifically to be their ambassador to Earth, assuring him he was the chosen one.
Which is textbook love bombing in chosen one language, right? It's designed to eliminate any internal skepticism or resistance in the subject and ensure total psychological compliance.
The Nine were now the heads of a galactic hierarchy, employing advanced, almost frighteningly clinical technology.
In this period, from about 1970 to 1974, it was defined by this intense high strangeness at Puharich's estate in Ossining, New York.
Which he christened Lab 9.
Of course he did.
Puharich claimed to receive direct communications on tape recorders that would spontaneously turn on and off, recording voices he labeled IS, which stood for intelligence from the sky.
And one of the most famous and specific incidents occurred on August 27, 1972, at Lab 9.
Right. A voice spontaneously recorded itself on the tape recorder declaring, "We are 9 principles and forces. The equation is MEO, 0C2AO, 1V2C2. One of your Earth scientists, Einstein, knew about us."
Which is such a deliberate attempt to fuse the metaphysical claim with hard scientific language. They're grounding the cosmic beings in modern physics and asserting their advanced technological knowledge.
And the high strangeness wasn't just auditory. Puharich also reported these truly bizarre, unbelievable physical feats allegedly performed by Geller under the influence of Spectra.
Like teleporting a dog through the walls of the house.
And dematerializing objects. Now, while scientific bodies like the Stanford Research Institute did validate Geller's ability to perceive hidden drawings, they explicitly refused to endorse the extraterrestrial claims or the high strangeness events.
But maybe the most chilling detail from this period is the dark side of Lab 9, which, it just echoes Puharich Edgewood past.
The Space Kids.
Puharich established a camp there for a group of children, the Space Kids, who he believed possessed unique psychic potential.
And these children were actively trained in remote viewing and constantly encouraged to contact the Nine. The operations involved the use of isolation techniques and Faraday cages.
The use of children in isolated, technologically controlled environments to study remote viewing and belief implantation. That precisely mirrors the classified history of MKUltra.
Where the use of children in mind control experimentation is a recognized and deeply concerning chapter.
So Puharich, the former captain from the Chemical Warfare Center, was running his own unsupervised experimental camp under the guise of spiritual advancement.
It's very hard to read that section and see Puharich as a neutral seeker.
At best, he seems like an obsessed scientist running highly questionable experiments on vulnerable subjects. And at worst,
he's a psychological operative continuing his military work under a New Age spiritual cover.
And Geller eventually distanced himself, right? He later dismissed the extraterrestrial claims as nothing more than entertaining space fantasy.
He did, which led Puharich to seek a new, more stable channel. And he quickly found one in Phyllis Schlemmer, a Florida-based medium who would eventually solidify the Nine's mythology for the next 2 decades.
With Schlemmer, the whole tone changes again. The mechanical, almost terrifying computerized voices of Spectra were replaced.
They were replaced by a much softer, more accessible, and undeniably more comforting entity known as Tom. Tom presented as a benevolent, fatherly spokesman for the Council of Nine, perfectly calibrating the message for the growing New Age audience.
And this shift marked the true masterstroke of the Nine's theology. It bridged ancient religion with the modern alien narrative in a single, devastatingly effective move.
Absolutely. Tom eventually revealed his ancient composite identity. He stated, "I am Tom. I am the spokesman for the Council of Nine. In truth, I am Tehuti, yes. I am also Hamarkos. I am also Herenkar. I am known as Thomas, and I am known as Atum."
Okay, wait. Let's unpack that specific reveal because that is the linchpin of the entire mythology.
It is.
Tom is claiming to be Atum, the self-created creator god of the ancient Egyptian Enna, the original group of 9 gods, and Tehuti, who is Thoth, the god of wisdom, writing, and magic.
Exactly. This one statement instantly canonized the entire narrative. It claims that the powerful, foundational gods worshipped by the ancients were not mystical beings, but rather the Council of Nine, non-corporeal administrators returning now to guide humanity using Science Age UFO terminology.
It replaces religious history with space history.
Perfectly put.
And the sessions with Schlemmer were compiled into the Bible of the movement, The Only Planet of Choice, which was published in 1993.
And the core doctrine established in that book gives the movement its central urgency and its supreme self-importance.
Which is what?
Earth is utterly unique. It is the only planet in the galaxy endowed with total free will.
This is critical, isn't it? According to Tom, this uniqueness makes Earth a bottleneck for cosmic evolution.
Right. All other civilizations have achieved oneness and spiritual unity, but Earth's chaotic free-willed nature means if we fail, if we destroy ourselves through nuclear war or spiritual corruption,
That blockage will dramatically affect the spiritual progression of the entire universe.
it grants the believers supreme cosmic responsibility. They aren't just saving their planet. They were unblocking the entire galaxy's destiny.
Wow. Talk about raising the stakes.
This highly structured concept of cosmic evolution and galactic responsibility leads us logically to the next part.
Yeah.
The elaborate, specific galactic bureaucracy the Nine supposedly oversee. Since the Council of Nine themselves exist as pure energy in the zone of cold and can't interact directly with dense physical reality, they require highly advanced physical intermediaries.
And these intermediaries are known as the 24 universal civilizations.
That's right. They are physical societies existing in different reality frequencies or dimensions, and they act as the hands and feet of the Nine. They're responsible for seeding planets and guiding planetary evolution, including ours, over vast epochs of time.
And they're described as having attained this state of total unity and complete obedience to the Creator.
Which immediately establishes a sharp contrast with the chaos, the fragmentation, and the free-willed nature of humans on Earth.
So, while there are 24 in total, the doctrine specifies that 4 of them played specific and defining roles in our planet's history. They're the source of our genetic and spiritual mixture.
Exactly. This is where the story gets wildly specific.
So let's break down these 4 primary civilizations. Let's start with Altea.
Altea is described as being located a massive 50 million light years away, and its inhabitants are beings of a higher vibration or frequency, almost ethereal yet physical.
And their historical role on Earth.
Specific and dramatic. They claim to be the technologically advanced rulers and progenitors of Atlantis.
So the Atlantis myth gets solded in.
Completely. Altea is characterized as essentially the lead civilization among the physical 24, responsible for providing high-level technology and guarding the essential communication link with the non-corporeal Nine.
Okay, then we get to Huva, which is, this is perhaps the most shocking claim in the entire cosmology because it attempts to redefine monotheism.
It really is. Huva is described as a physical civilization comprised of smaller, darker-skinned beings. They claim to be the originators of the Hebrews and, crucially, the Nazarene Jesus.
And the channeling material explicitly identifies Huva as the civilization of Jehovah or Yahweh.
Yes, they are described as the builders and planters, responsible for specific genetic experiments and reseedings of Earth over millennia.
So, if I'm understanding this correctly, the core claim is that the entity millions of people worship as the God of Abraham, the creator of the world Jehovah, is, according to the Nine, simply the name of a physical, albeit highly advanced, extraterrestrial civilization. Huva.
That is precisely the claim. The narrative asserts that Jesus was not God in the Trinitarian omnipotent sense, but rather a specific Huvid agent, a highly evolved representative of the Huva civilization.
Sent to do what?
Sent to correct the genetic and spiritual path of the specific group they planted, the Hebrews, and reawaken their dormant genetic coding.
It strips the entire foundational narrative of Western civilization of its spiritual mystery and replaces it with advanced interstellar genetics and bureaucratic oversight.
That's a perfect summary. It's an astonishing level of doctrinal audacity. It completely secularizes and simplifies the divine.
So what about the final 2 civilizations?
We have Ashan. They focus intensely on artistic and cultural development. They're associated geographically with the Nordic and Scandinavian peoples and are credited with influencing major cultural epochs, notably the Renaissance.
So they brought music, art, and cultural richness to Earth through their genetic input.
That's the idea. The cosmology suggests the blending of Ashen, Altea, and Huva DNA is what creates the unique, volatile, and high-potential connection in the human genetic makeup.
And finally, Aragon.
Aragon is presented as a civilization of great healers, associated specifically with ancient medical traditions like those found in Egypt and Greece. Their primary focus is on healing, physiology, and the repair of the physical vessel. They represent the medical component of our composite genetics.
What's truly fascinating about this elaborate structure is how neatly it synthesizes existing fringe ideas of the 1960s and 70s.
Right.
This isn't just random channeling. This is a fully fleshed out, highly organized theology that marries the ancient astronaut theories popularized by people like Erich von Däniken.
With a profound messianic interventionist purpose, it creates a perfectly logical, albeit bizarre, system.
The complexity and detail suggest a massive amount of intellectual heavy lifting went into its creation. Humans on Earth are simply a composite species carrying the DNA of these specific civilizations.
And it goes further. Many souls currently on Earth are allegedly from the 24, who volunteered to reincarnate in our dense physical atmosphere to help raise the planetary vibration before the ultimate failure of the bottleneck.
So it's a secularized, complex, and highly structured divine narrative where every historical myth is just explained away by extraterrestrial intervention.
The theoretical structure of the Nine is compelling in its strangeness, but its true power and success lie in its profound cultural footprint.
Specifically, the influential individuals they allegedly convinced and the global media they managed to infiltrate.
And there is no greater example of this than Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek.
Roddenberry was not just a passing admirer of the New Age scene. He was a direct, active participant in the key channeling sessions with Puharich and Phyllis Schlemmer between 74 and 75.
He attended the roundtable discussions at Schlemmer's home, asking very specific, detailed questions of the entity Tom.
Yeah, the idea that cosmic entities might be subliminally guiding his creative output. That absolutely captivated Roddenberry.
It led him to write an unproduced script, which he simply titled The Nine, intended as a major feature film.
And that script's plot is incredibly telling because it perfectly reflects the meta-narrative of the Council of Nine itself.
How so?
The story features a writer, an obvious stand-in for Roddenberry, who is approached by ESP researchers claiming contact with alien intelligences. And the twist is that the aliens reveal they have been using the writer's creative talent to prepare humanity culturally for first contact.
By planting the fundamental idea of a benevolent federation in the public consciousness.
So Roddenberry was literally writing a story admitting that his life's work, Star Trek, might be a deliberate, extraterrestrially guided form of soft, psychological conditioning for humanity.
And the direct influences on the resulting Star Trek franchise they're undeniable. They run through the very DNA of the entire universe he created.
The most direct, obvious homage is the series Deep Space Nine.
The title itself is a clear, acknowledged nod to the Council.
But the conceptual influence is deeper. The central cosmic entity in that show, the Prophets, are explicitly non-corporeal aliens who live outside linear time within a wormhole, guiding the destiny of the Bajoran people.
Which is a near-exact replica of the Council of Nine's structure, existing as non-physical energy in the zone of cold and governing planetary evolution.
And the theology of the Nine saturates the entire Star Trek universe's philosophy. Remember the Council's strict adherence to free will.
Their doctrine stating they must absolutely refuse to intervene, even to stop global nuclear war, unless explicitly asks.
That mirrors the Federation's most sacred law, the Prime Directive, the absolute non-interference with developing cultures.
And, the massive bureaucracy of the 24 universal civilizations functioning as a united, efficient, collective consciousness that provides a potential blueprint for some of the franchise's darker elements.
Like the Borg.
It may have significantly influenced the concept of the Borg, representing the shadow side of a hive mind, the loss of individuality in pursuit of forced technological oneness.
It's a remarkable cultural feedback loop. Through Star Trek, the esoteric theology and political structure of the Council of Nine, a story born out of Cold War experimentation involving a man who worked at Edgewood Arsenal,
has been disseminated to billions of people globally, successfully preparing the culture for the concept of a galactic federation structure governed by unseen, highly advanced beings.
But the infiltration didn't stop at Hollywood. We have to look at business.
Right. One of the core members of the Schlemmer Group, Sir John Whitmore, was an English aristocrat and a financier.
And he became a seminal figure, a titan of the burgeoning business coaching industry. He essentially brought the esoteric principles of the Nine directly into the corporate world.
Whitmore is credited with introducing the famous Groro model: goal, reality, options, will.
Right. And while the model is secular on the surface, the source material notes that Whitmore's work, particularly the emphasis on the concept of will or intention, was deeply informed by the transpersonal psychology and the metaphysical teachings derived directly from the Nine channeling sessions.
Specifically, Tom's guidance on planetary intention.
So the lesson here is that whether you are watching a major television series about galactic politics or sitting in a multinational corporate boardroom planning leadership strategy,
The subtle principles established by Puharich and Tom, principles of guided intention, cosmic hierarchy, and purposeful evolution, have infiltrated those environments and shaped the expectations of modern organizational structure. It shows the incredible reach of this synthetic belief system.
and this profound cultural success brings us directly to the counter-narrative, the hypothesis that forces us to question everything we've just discussed.
The Stargate conspiracy.
Researchers like Lynn Picknett and Clive Prince argue persuasively that the Council of Nine is not a benevolent celestial hierarchy, but a highly sophisticated, long-term psychological operation in a meticulously constructed PsyOp.
Conducted by U.S. intelligence agencies utilizing Puharich as the central handler and agent provocateur.
And the core of the argument is rooted entirely in Puharich's technical capabilities and his documented dual loyalty.
So the belief system, according to this theory, was created intentionally by military intelligence. They blended ancient myths, Adam, Thoth, with then emerging UFO tropes to test the boundaries of human suggestibility and engineer a new, universally accessible, global religious paradigm.
The theory posits a highly intentional divide-and-rule strategy aimed at broad social engineering.
By creating a synthetic belief system that felt both scientifically advanced and spiritually fulfilling, the intelligence community could strategically manipulate influential leaders in media, science, and finance.
And we saw the mechanics of this manipulation firsthand in the Geller and Roddenberry episodes. The entities consistently flattered their targets,
Telling figures like Roddenberry and Whitmore that they were chosen or key components of planetary evolution.
It's a classic espionage technique, love bombing or ego stroking. It's designed specifically to ensure the subjects are maximally invested, compliant, and unlikely to question the source of the message.
Furthermore, the operation provided the perfect, long-term, compartmentalized setting for testing advanced mind control techniques.
The repeated use of hypnosis, the presence of specific technology, the isolation techniques used on mediums like Geller and Schlemmer.
It allowed researchers to study precisely how effectively false, complex belief systems, complete with detailed historical and cosmic narratives, could be implanted and sustained over decades.
And the physical evidence at Lab 9 heavily supports this terrestrial manufactured origin. Puhar's dual loyalty never ceased. His centrality to every major psychic event of the 1970s suggests he was acting as a handler running sophisticated agents.
Rather than simply a neutral researcher recording data.
And the technological evidence is perhaps the most damning.
It really is. If the Council of Nine is real, why did Puharich, the medical inventor, build Faraday cages at Lab 9? Why use specialized electronics?
The presence of these tools implies that the voices and physical phenomena, the IS communications spontaneously appearing on tape recorders, may have been intentional stagecraft.
Or induced via ELF waves, or, most critically, Puharich's patented bone conduction hearing aid technology.
It's the key question. Why would cosmic beings who exist in a zone of cold require technology designed to bypass the human eardrum?
The answer, according to the PsyOp hypothesis, is that the source was terrestrial and electronic.
So we have a sophisticated mechanism for direct thought induction, coupled with textbook psychological manipulation, and overseen by a former captain from the U.S. military's Chemical Warfare Research Division.
That is a scenario built for covert operations, not spiritual enlightenment.
And if the Nine were a PsyOp, what was the ultimate grand ambition?
Conspiracy theorists suggest the final endgame was to prepare the world for a staged second coming, or a fabricated alien contact event.
By successfully seeding the belief that the ancient gods, Adam, Thoth, Jehovah, are actually extraterrestrials who are returning.
The manipulators set the stage for a global, seamless acceptance of a new synthetic space religion. This engineered event could potentially unify the world under a single, highly controlled narrative, dictated by the supposed returning cosmic masters.
It's a truly dizzying scenario, A belief system that manages to explain the entire universe and the purpose of human existence.
But which was potentially created entirely in a government-linked laboratory to control how we perceive the universe and our place in it.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? The Council of Nine, regardless of whether you accept their cosmic claims or the counter-conspiracy theory, it functions as a perfect Rorschach test for the modern age. It perfectly reflects our deepest existential fears and our highest technological aspirations.
To the believer, they are the ancient Elohim, the returning Ennead of Egypt. They're benevolent overseers who offer a comforting, highly structured universe where Earth's chaos has ultimate necessary meaning.
They promise the return of the Space Brothers, Huva, Althea, Aishon, waiting to welcome us into a vast galactic federation.
But to the skeptic, the historian, and the intelligence researcher, the Nine are a masterclass in myth-making and social engineering.
They represent the successful, terrifying collision of Cold War paranoia, advanced MK-Ultra mind control research, and the immense power of media genius channeled through figures like Roddenberry.
The evidence of Puharich's deep intelligence agency involvement it's overwhelming. It suggests a purely terrestrial, high-level intelligence origin for the entire doctrine.
However, regardless of whether they originated from the Zone of Cold or a CIA-linked laboratory in Maryland, Puharich's long-running experiment undeniably succeeded.
Oh, absolutely. He created a lasting cultural and spiritual movement. He birthed a new kind of God for the 20th century and beyond, a deity that was part computer, part alien, part ancient Egyptian myth.
And perfectly tailored to the sensibilities of a post-atomic world.
And the influence didn't stop in the 70s. The source notes that the Nine cosmology has spread and mutated through the entire New Age community.
It deeply influenced major subsequent channelings like the Ra material or the Law of One.
The Pleiadian channelings and the entire modern disclosure movement surrounding government admission of UFOs.
So the idea of a structured, hierarchical galactic federation is now a standard accepted trope in alternative spirituality, thanks in no small part to the work done at Lab 9.
Which leads to our final provocative thought for you to carry forward.
Lay it on us.
Given its direct and undeniable influence on Star Trek, the most culturally ubiquitous representation of our future relationship with the cosmos, how much of our current secular and spiritual expectations for first contact, the benevolent guidance, the structured hierarchy, the concept of the Prime Directive itself, were pre-programmed by this single, complex intelligence operation revelation that began with a captain in the Army Medical Corps and a specialized bone conduction hearing aid in the 1970s.
The deep dive into the archives of knowledge never truly ends. If you want to keep peeling back the layers on stories this complex, this shocking, and this influential, we tell the whole story to the people, and we don't leave anything out. Make sure you follow and subscribe to The Deep Dive. New episodes drop every Tuesday and Friday. Don't miss the next one.